to Wisco Dice. Hey, yo, folks, I am your host, the Conzi with the Most, and I am joined today by...
Hey, everybody, it's Justin, the Meeples champion here.
And I'm Suzanne. And today we have a very special guest and longtime friend of the show here with us, James. James, why don't you say hi to our audience?
Hello, audience. Good to be back. It's been a long time.
And you know what that means when James is joining. That means we're talking about RPGs today. But first, this is episode 121 of the Wisco Dice Tabletop Gaming Podcast.
Woohoo!
And today is March 27th, 2024. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what we think about when we create new characters for RPG games. So, most of us, at least the Wisco Dice team, the regulars, are about to endeavor in this character, or are currently endeavoring in this character creation process for a new campaign for Dungeons and Dragons that we're about to start. And so we thought, hey, this would be a good time to talk about this topic and give our thoughts about what we go through when we generate a new character and what our hopes and dreams are and thoughts in that process. I think it's an interesting process. And then, for myself, I'm kind of the perpetual GM, so it doesn't really matter what the system. I tend to run the games, being in that chair. But so it's going to be really interesting for me to hear your thoughts as players, what you guys go through and think as you create these characters, not only for this game, but for other games you've played in the past. And I think, I'm hoping to kind of approach this in three different kind of broad areas if I was to throw my painting brush at it and really break it down into, at least the way I think about it, is that initial approach, that excitement, like, oh, hey, I've got a new game I'm potentially joining or I'm going to join. What's that initial approach and thought process look like that you go through? Then, once you have maybe some of the party dynamics and you're talking with the other players, what kind of thoughts and considerations might you apply as a group to make sure you have the right character balance and roles and responsibilities kind of laid out for those characters? And then really ultimately, I think the third broad brushstroke is what really gets you excited about that character once you're really starting to get into that character generation process. Again, that's wide brushstrokes. I don't know if this conversation is going to be kind of guided by that, but I thought I'd kind of lay it out, at least my thought process for today, and hopefully we can have a great conversation. So I did want to note, for those of you that are curious what we're starting for our new campaign, it's going to be The Darkest Dream, the Red Star Rising campaign from GUI Cube. So we are starting that for our Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign. That'll be the first of many chapters we will be going through with this party, hopefully, if there's no TPKs involved. But it's going to be a much different experience than a more traditional Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So I'm really excited for it. I rarely have an adventure module that I pick up and when I'm getting excited for a new campaign and get to near the end of the module and can't put it, and I can't stop myself. It's like reading a good book. I couldn't stop. I had to keep reading until the end.
GUI Cube makes good stuff.
Yeah, they're really good stuff. And so with that, let's kind of talk a little bit about that initial approach. What do you all think? How do you approach this?
Well, I'm going to say that I'm very interested to hear how James and Justin approach this, because this is my first ever RPG. And I've just done like a ton of reading to try and understand what I need to do. So I don't know how you guys approach this, you veterans in character creation.
I could start things off. I wouldn't really call myself a veteran. I've dabbled in D&D since I was a teenager, but not.
Then you're a veteran.
I've made a fair number of characters, and I've I've thought about it a lot. So for me, the first thing I'm trying to do with a new character is just come up with a fun concept. Like, I want to make sure that I have fun playing this character, and I want something that is interesting, that is fun for me to characterize as a player, like while I'm acting as the character or just, interacting with other people. And also that is fun to play from like a mechanical perspective. Both of those are pretty important to me. So I'm taking all that in consideration when I'm making choices about the class I'm picking or the role I might have in the party and things like that. And when I say characterize, like I want my characters to have a distinct personality. I want to be able to find the character's voice that's a clear voice, not just like an actual voice that I might be giving them when I talk in that character, but like what's their style, what's their behavior like, what are their flaws, what are their quirks. Characters without flaws are boring. You need to give your character some things that, they're not perfect. I think I like to have my characters have some humor to them. I have made the mistake in the past of trying to create a character that's super cool and like takes themselves too seriously. And I think that just runs you into a wall for characterizing that during the game and keeps you separate from the other players. So just from my perspective, I want there to be some humor involved in the character too. So that's kind of what I mean by characterizing the character. It doesn't flow off the tongue real well, but and then the last thing I guess I'd say, like from that perspective, I do try to leave some room to flesh out the character somewhat during the game. I don't want to understand everything about the character as I'm coming in. I want to have a good sense. I want to have a style, a personality, but part of the whole joy of D&D is interacting with other people and building the character along the way through the story of the campaign. So leaving room for picking up new personality or different quirks or just ways of behaving throughout the campaign that are based on what's going on in the campaign and other players and stuff too. I want to leave some empty spaces for that stuff. James, what's kind of your approach when you're first making a character?
Well, I really second a lot of what you said. I kind of have to back up a little bit though and think first off, what am I making this character for? Because my approach to am I making this character for organized play? Let's take, D&D Adventures League. That expectation is going to be a little different than if I'm making a character for a pre-written module, like Conzi was just talking about, because a pre-written module is obviously going to have certain expectations of what's being represented. There's going to be challenges that are going to need to be overcome that might be appropriate for certain character types or classes. Or if I'm making a character, if I've got a buddy who says, I'm going to make a homebrewed system, then he could design the system around whatever character people wanted, right? So you don't necessarily have to have that classic D&D party.
Mm-hmm.
So that I first have to start with, all right, if I'm going to make a character for organized play, then there's going to be some expectations that if I say I'm playing the rogue, well, then the table is going to be very upset with me if my whole gimmick is I'm a thief who's really bad at being a thief.
Yeah.
All right. Because that might be a very fun character concept to play with my buddies if they came in with that. But if I'm jumping into Adventures League at Gen Con and I say, yeah, I'm taking the thief class for this challenge, this tier 3 challenge, oh, they're going to be real mad at me if I have made a suboptimal thief.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna ask what would you say? I don't have a ton of experience with organized play, so just interested. Is there a pretty strong expectation of optimization for a character in that setting?
I don't know. But that's how I have approached building it.
Mhm.
That I'm going to build it with the expectation that I'm going to come in fitted in for that type. Now that doesn't
Gotcha.
mean you can't have fun with it. One of my favorite parts of 5th edition, since we've got such a strong D&D group here, is that the fact that you can have your class and your background be completely disconnected. That leads to some fun play style. So my first character for 5th edition D&D was a paladin who could heal, could hit like a dump truck with using that smite ability. But I took the background urchin. And I took my opening feat, Variant Human, my absolute favorite class to play in 5th edition D&D because you get to start with a feat. I took that feat, Medium Armor Mastery. So I was a paladin who could also sneak and could pick locks because that was part of the urchin background. So I was still an efficiently built paladin, but I had, a couple tricks in my back pocket that people wouldn't expect that made it made it very fun to play that character, even though I was building towards an optimal paladin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It sounds like you made the character more complex and more 3D in some ways versus just, hey, I'm a rogue, I'm a thief on paper, and everything I have is focused on that. You're giving them like their backstory and their, where they came from, and giving them this, like all of us have that little bit of our lives that most of the people we interact with don't know about, that adds some personality to us. So that's a good way of looking at it. I'm gonna have to reconsider my characters, I think.
So if in the case where you might be playing with just some friends, you might be more willing to make even sort of out of character, out of class decisions is kind of what I'm getting the idea of. You might be willing to, not go for something quote unquote suboptimal or something. Sounds like maybe.
Absolutely. Everyone loves workshopping characters, I think, in their free time. I don't think there are very, very few people who don't like doing that, right? You crack open a new RPG book or a new D&D supplement, and you're immediately making characters in your head, or you're logging into whatever your platform of choice is that lets you build them. But if I'm playing with some buddies, again, even if we're doing, like Conesy's doing, a pre-made adventure, I love session zeros. And is this something that, what do you think? Should we explain session zero? You folks know session zeros.
We do know session zero.
I think it'd be good for the listeners, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. So we are using a session zero for this new campaign, and I used a session zero for the last campaign. But basically, at least the way I approach a session zero is that it's the foundational session where we're going to lay the groundwork for the game we're about to play. That means making sure that we have a clear set of expectations about what the behavior at the table is going to be, what the content for the game is going to be. Usually there's been the pitch. The pitch has happened well before this. So everybody is at least intrigued when we get to session zero for the idea, but more of that groundwork, more of that concept conceptually gets laid out by whoever's running the game. And then ultimately that session zero will oftentimes lead into character generation, or at least getting the players talking about what characters they want to play. The way I like to do it is, if possible, I want to be able to get to characters generated or roughly generated and get into hopefully a little bit of role play and actual play, especially if we've all gotten together in person. Everybody wants to at least spend maybe 45 minutes or an hour, rolling dice or having some kind of encounter or something, so they can start to take that character concept to the next level as we maybe finish off backstories and whatnot between the next that session zero and not. But that's how I approach session zero. I think there's about 1 billion answers to session zero, but my answer is that it's a prep session to get everybody on board and to make sure if there's any hey, I'm interested, or maybe that people click together or whatever, that is kind of fleshed out ahead of time before you commit to whether it's a 8-week campaign or like our last one was 2.5 years.
Dang.
Yeah. It lived. It survived.
It was only once a month, but 2.5 years of sessions.
I mean, I'd say that's how I think of session zero as well. Yeah, I think session zero is a great time to determine, among other things, like you said, the overall scope of it. So if we've got 4 people thinking, okay, we're coming in approaching this like we want to play Game of Thrones, and I come in saying, hey guys, I want to play Your Highness. maybe we're going to have some issues then, and that's the time to iron it out, right? Or when we come in and say, I've built a character for dungeon crawling and discovered that everyone else wants to be a theater kid, I'm going to be having a terrible time.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really good point, and something that I probably do not consider enough when I'm first making a character, that like this idea that I have, while fun to me, cool to me, while I'm coming up with it, like it may not fit in with what everybody else is interested in. So it's a consideration that I really need to think about more, especially as I'm coming into our session 0 now. Like I think what I've done for this particular campaign is gonna be fine, but it's not like wasn't at the top of my mind of like what are other people gonna want to do? How do they want to play? You know, like you said, if I'm just building this ultra optimized dungeon crawler killer, like may not be the tone of the adventure at all. So that's a really good point.
It is a really good point, and it's one that I'm glad you brought up, James, because that is exactly one of my goals, and I keep saying it, but I don't think I said it as eloquently to our group of players, because the last, we did 2.5 years, and I'm very proud of actually running a campaign for that long, and we got to a really awesome end of that, and we're gonna probably relaunch another campaign at some point with those same characters, because they're only like, I think, level 10 or 11 now, so there's plenty of room to explore those characters more. But when we sat down and did our session 0 and kind of came up with that batch of characters, it was everybody just kind of played what they wanted. There was very little coming together as a group to be able to create those concepts together and think about it. Okay, how does this character work within the greater group dynamic? So once you've had that session 0, or once you've started to come together as a group, what do you guys think about as you're going through that? Okay, how is this character going to fit in with the rest of the group? Or in the case of Suzanne, have you even considered that, or what makes you nervous about that?
Well, I'll say for myself, I did consider that quite a bit and try to, when people were talking about what they were interested in, see where mine would fit in. But I probably didn't consider it enough. Like I was kind of picking, hey, what character do I want to see in the story from the material that I read? And what, for me, coming in as a new to RPG player, playing with people that have been playing together for a couple years, what do I feel comfortable with being able to maintain the character while I'm playing, and also understand what skills and proficiencies and different tricks this character has, so that I'm not slowing down the rest of the campaign and I'm optimizing my character with what I feel comfortable with. Like you all, like a lot of games, like you have your comfort zone, right? So I'm trying to kind of stay in my comfort zone as I'm creating it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, I guess when I say creating it, I've created 6 different characters because I'm lining them all up to see what combinations I like the best.
Part of my pre-coaching a new player was helping them. We did a role play session actually with an actual combat encounter, so she got to see and experience that. It really helped her. I'm done trying to do enough in the background to help coach Suzanne up, so that when it comes to that first time you ask to roll initiative or to roll a skill check, she's not completely disorientated at the table.
You got like session -1 in there even.
Yes. That's pretty much exactly what we call it. So, and then I asked her, I told her, like, you should sit down before session 0. You should sit down and draw up a number of characters, even with no intent to play them, just to go through the process and see how, like, your choices impact the character a little bit mechanically, so that you can use that information when you get to session 0 to be like, as the conversation happens as a new player, you can hear, oh, okay, hey, I can do this thing, so you don't have to worry about maybe filling that role or whatnot.
Yes. And then what Conzi left out is the next step after that for me is that I need to paint a whole bunch of different D&D miniatures so I can see which ones I can paint that line up with the characters I've created. So I have, what do I have? 15 different little miniatures here to try and paint before our first session.
Which will be followed by a rapid purchasing of dice to match the color scheme. She's painted all those figures.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Tracks,
Two
absolutely
sets.
tracks.
Yeah. See, I'm not the only crazy one here, Conzi. Yes, you have to buy new dice for each
We
character.
are Wisco dice
Otherwise they won't
after all.
work.
So, Justin, was there anything? I think the concept of how does the character work in the group sounded like that wasn't something you were really thinking about. But have you thought about that in the past with character generation at all, or?
So I'll say that, like, in terms of like how the personality of the character meshes with the party, that's sort of what I was saying. I hadn't really thought about, like, the tone of the character and how that works with what other people want to do and how they want to play. When it comes to mechanics, though, I definitely am considering how my character works with the party as a whole. Like, I'm a bit of an optimizer, I guess, in that I want to be effective in what my role is. I want to be effective in my niche in the party, right? I mean, at the top level, I just want to do cool stuff. Whatever class I'm playing, I want them to be able to do something cool and feel cool doing it, whatever it is. If it's smiting as a paladin, if it's sneak attacking as a rogue, like, I want a cool thing. That's my thing. But I do want that to be balanced with other characters. While I think it would be fun to have a party of entirely made of clerics, it probably would get boring after a while. If everybody's doing like the same stuff.
Yeah, you'd never hit anything.
And that's where James is, having that opposite type of backstory or background comes in. So you have all these clerics, but they're all coming from different
Totally
weird
different,
places.
yeah.
They're all stuck in religious debate because they're all worshipers of different deities. So, James, what do you think about?
Well, I actually, if you don't mind, I'm gonna spin this in a little other direction, because you're handling something that a lot of people don't consider very well. You've got a first-time player coming into a role with a lot of veteran players, and I think something that a lot of experienced players forget, even if they are the friendliest people in the world, being the new person is intimidating. And it does not matter if, I played a D&D game once with a school teacher who was very good at his job, with their spouse who had also, remembered what it was like to be a new player and had at their college helped usher a lot of new players in. And then we tried to bring my wife in. And it was intimidating for her just to drop right in, because even though we were all ready and gung-ho to be teachers and take her through her first game, she was still very well aware that she was playing with people who had a decade or more of experience doing different RPGs. So I think your what did Justin call it? The session -1 was a great way to go about it that I wish we had done. And it's something to consider that, beginner friendly only gets you so far. It's scary to be a beginner, and the longer that we've been doing this, the less we remember how scary our first time was. Yeah, I think that I want to just take a second to absolutely applaud what you're doing with Suzanne, because Suzanne, you sound like you're ready to jump in now. You've got your little Rolodex of possibilities too. I like that idea.
Yes, I just need to paint up a few more models. So, but yeah, it definitely helps, because you can read about it, but some people learn by reading. I learned by doing. So as much as I've read through the player's handbook a couple times, 2, 3, 5 times, I'm not going to be able to really understand it until I'm actually playing it, which is what helped with this session -1. So, but Justin, you were going to add something too.
There's some other things I would probably add that I like to think about, like, as I'm building a character. that might be useful information for a new person. I think I might have even talked to you a little bit about some of this kind of stuff, but like I want to put myself in the head of my character, put myself in the mind of my character, right? I'm not always great at staying in that character when I play, and I come out to like do things out of character just because I'm like having my own ideas and stuff. But like I do want to be in the mind of my character. So I do try to think about like what are this character's actual motivations? Why are they doing this stuff? Why do I want to be adventuring? Like I think, this has probably been said in a zillion different ways, but your character needs to have a good reason to be adventuring. So what is that for your character? Are they just they want to see the world? Do they want revenge for something? Is there some big bad in their background that they're out there to stop? Does seeing people being hurt really drive them nuts and they want to go enact justice in the world, that kind of thing? Like, what's your character's reasons for doing stuff? I try to think about those kind of things. I try to think about internal conflicts in the character. So like what kind of stuff would happen that would make me break their personality or break character a little bit? Again, the whole idea of having flaws, being interesting, having some conflicts, like your character is not always perfect, more interesting. Like for an example, I played in our previous campaign, I played Koth. He was a half-orc barbarian, and he was like a enslaved gladiator in his background. So he was now a paladin and like on the side of good and everything. But I think there was a point in the campaign where he came face to face with somebody who was somehow connected to this organization that ran this gladiatorial ring that he was part of when he was young, and that kind of got me to the point of like what would Koth do? Like Koth would probably be trying to kill this person, like without like a really good argument against it. He would want to kill them, and that probably really goes against the idea of like a paladin, at least the kind of paladin that I was. I'll give Ben credit. He actually role played the opposite side of that really, really well and kind of talked my character out of it. But like that's sort of like an internal conflict that Koth had of like his sort of orcish rage and the trauma from his upbringing to like now he's sort of supposed to be a beacon of goodness or whatever. And I think it's just even if that stuff never comes out of your head when you're playing, if it's all just for you, I think that's great. Like if you understand how your character thinks, it'll just make the game better for you to have those things in your head.
Absolutely. And I think if I could jump in,
Oh yeah.
We should not discount sometimes, and again, if this is kind of why I compartmentalize the difference between drop-in organized play and playing with friends in a more controlled environment. Let's not discount that. Sometimes you just want to grab a sheet, roll some dice, kick down the door, kill their monster, and steal their stuff. I mean, that is how D&D began, and there is absolutely something fun to that. So I think despite, Justin, what you said, and despite what I'm probably about to say, if that is what you're going to do, if that's the way you like to play your RPGs, great, go nuts, have fun. And I just like I personally like any chance I can get to play a game that if I know that's what I'm going to get into, then I'm going to be a happy man because I've come prepared for that. But if I'm going to make a character that I know is going to have more long-term potential, then I absolutely take approaches to in the way that Justin, you were saying, like, I need to get into this character's head, even if it's things that will never come out, just to know a situation that might come up. I want to know how I want to react to it in advance, a little bit, just a little bit. And again, I think this is why in part a session 0 is important, because if you are playing with a group of people that you're willing to sit down with once a month, once a week, for 2.5 years, once a month, as Cozy was saying, I think you got to be willing to spill some of your secrets out of character in front of each other, just to make sure that that's not also going to cause a long-term conflict. Because eventually, you don't want that to come up and say, oh, I'm sorry, my character turns out they hate drow, and you were a drow in disguise this whole time. I had to stab you. we got to be prepared for that, right?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's not to say you can't have secrets. You just have to build. I think one of the great things I don't think Ben really mentioned is Session Zero is a great chance to build trust with your other characters and run things by whoever your GM is going to be. So at least your GM can say, hey, I can't spill the beans on what Suzanne's going to play, but what you just pitched to me is not going to be compatible. So can we tweak it a little bit? But for my personal approach, listen, it's not stealing, it's researching. Never be afraid to take inspiration from something else you absolutely love. Okay, I'm going to shout out the Madison area D&D Adventures League. I'm playing in an occasional streaming game with them. My character was shamelessly based on, okay, what if we took Buster Keaton and we took Lou Costello and we slammed them together and threw them into D&D? That was my approach to character creation. That is my, in terms of mechanics, like, okay, I know I want to make someone who's very good at acrobatics and good at sleight of hand and clearly not the brightest bulb on the chain. And the character doesn't, you're not going to watch the character and go, I'm not breaking into who's on first, but it's nice to know, okay, I've got that baseline from that classic media of personality to be at how I'm going to explain how my character is scrambling up the wall. It's boring to say, well, I've got a +9 to my acrobatics, so boom, okay, there we go. I rolled a 25. That's incredible. No. I can say, okay, what would this look like? Oh, okay, he clearly scurried up. He clearly scurried up the pole and went arm over arm across the clothesline. Or I'm going to say, okay, how would a bumbling person who's not as sure of himself? Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of Abbott and Costello movies. Okay, I'm going to pull a few things from there. That's going to work. And it does help make a unique experience. You don't be afraid to rip something off that is a character you enjoy in media. When my spouse first played D&D, absolutely based it on Hermione Granger and avoided a fight by shaming a lynch mob into backing down. Okay.
That's awesome.
That is
absolutely great advice, and it's actually great advice in the previous campaign. So one of the things I do as a GM in the games I run is that I like to, at least for the early sessions, after the session is done, or look over my notes, and as I prep for the next session, go, where did they struggle, or what could I encourage them to maybe explore more or learn more? And then they start the next session with, here's a tip for something you can incorporate into the game. And one of those tips early, because the game that we just ran that was 2.5 years had a number of players that were really experiencing an RPG for the first time, was to sit down and give them that exact tip. As you're thinking about your character and how you embody this character at the table, you don't need to do funny voices. You don't need to wear funny clothes. In fact, I kind of recommended them in the first campaign to not wear funny clothes or to be silly dressed up in your Ren Fair costumes, which isn't a silly thing, by the way. I wanted to, for that group, is kind of, don't do it here. That's not like, that was one of those Session Zero things. Don't do it at this game, because I want you to, when you're thinking about your character, if it's easy to just pick a couple of characteristics of your favorite pop culture media character, whether it's from a comic book, a movie, whatever, and just that's what you're embodying. So great point, James. I think that's absolutely nails on it. It really helps not only somebody who might be new to role playing, but even veteran role players, to help them embody and bring that personality of that character to the table. Not just, hey, I rolled a 17 and I whacked them with my sword. So moving the conversation on just a little bit further into this exploration of that approach, when I talked about what gets you excited, and I have a character concept. I haven't really talked a lot about what gets me excited about a character, but for me, that personality of that character is what gets me excited about each and every one of them, whether I'm watching the players develop their personalities of their characters, or if I'm got my own character concept for a character I might eventually someday play, whether it's a suave Han Solo-like rogue, which I have one that I have occasionally will show up and play in Adventurers League, or the old granny-like lady that has a bag of apples, and her whole stick is, "Would you like an apple?" And then, I think I made her like a Death Domain cleric or something like that. But she's completely harmless. Like, she's a completely harmless old lady who just likes to offer people apples, just taking on that classic Disney movie characteristic, and people were immediately latch on to it. So what makes you guys excited about the characters that you're either thinking about playing, in the case of Suzanne the first time, or as you get, you've gotten past this, you've gotten into the session 0, you're getting closer to that, hey, we're going to actually roll dice and actually embody this character in the game. What gets you excited about that character?
Yeah, I can start off again. The process of building character on its own is fun for me. Like James said, like I love just coming up with some character concepts, rolling up a character, even if it's never going to get played. Like, very very fun to do on its own. For me, it's like, yeah, it's just drawing on a blank sheet of paper, got endless possibilities, and it's just a fun creative exercise to just imagine and see where things go. So on its own, it's fun for me. But I'm also, the possibilities of a new campaign just get me excited. Like, just the start of a new thing is exciting to me. So that's part of it for me, that like I've got this whole new idea that I get to try out. Everybody else is going to have new stuff. Like, it's a new campaign, new world, even now, totally different than the previous campaign we were in. So just the newness of all of that is definitely gets me hyped up. And I think it was mentioned, but honestly, just the new stuff too. Painting a new mini, getting some new dice. Like, I love that, man. It's awesome. That gets me excited. One thing I guess I'll say too, that like I'm always excited to name a character, but God, does it take me a long time. I love coming up with names, but it takes me so long to hit a perfect name that I'm comfortable with and happy with. I think I spent, and I'm all, Koth was pretty easy. He was a simple name, but like the current character that I'm designing, I spent, I don't know, it must have been like 4 hours just tooling around with different versions and iterations of different stuff for his name. Like, so that's fun, but it does take me a long time.
Oh gosh. I guess I need to spend more time on the name generation for my characters then.
No,
I
no,
go
you
back
don't.
to the drawing board because I'm more of a, hey, I'm gonna just look at the names and whichever one jumps out of the page while I'm thinking about the character, that's what I pick. So they're named in like 10 seconds flat.
That's perfect. Don't go down my dark road. It doesn't need to be
But
perfect.
now
It
I
just
might
needs to be
need
yours.
to. Calling off work tomorrow to name characters for D&D.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll fly, but James, what do you get excited about?
Well, a lot of what Justin said is the same. The newness, the painting, the minis, the blank page. But for me, I know this is a very D&D strong group. So one of the things that really shifted gears for me maybe about 10, 15 years ago in my approach to RPGs, that I was really happy to see 5th edition D&D bring up. One of the things that gets me really excited is, how is this character going to fail? I love the fact that 5th edition D&D designed not just flaws in character creation, but a mechanical reward for it. Like, if you're playing with the inspiration rolls, you get inspiration by giving in that character's flaw, right? This is something I'm really happy to see more and more RPGs do, be it 5th edition, be it Fate. The various Fate games are great at this. Even some of the not Worlds of Darkness, Chronicle of Darkness games started doing this, because failure is where a lot of the fun comes in. Man, if you like the D&D movie, love the Honor Among Thieves movie as much as I did, they even had a whole monologue about that. And so, yeah, I think one of my favorite things is not just what is this character going to be really good at, and what is are his badass moments going to be, but what are his flaws going to be? How are these flaws going to make a more interesting story, too? That is something that I honestly look forward to when I'm making a character creation, because I think that's really important. Success at all the time is boring, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think having like, all right, what are my weaknesses, but how am I looking forward to these weaknesses being exploited? I picked them for a reason. What are those reasons going to be, and what are those reasons going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. That was another one of those early lessons, early things that I talked about at the table, I believe, is, don't get upset when you encounter failure at the table. Embrace failure, because the stories that I remember most about the games I've ran or played in almost inevitably are around those moments of failure. And that's the thing that stands out. Not the overcoming the big dragon or the big googly tentacle beast of horror or whatever you're dealing with. It is the, oh, hey, the tentacle beast that was trapped in ice mentally messed with the character and made them think that they were a professor instead of an adventurer. And how did the player, because the player failed a saving throw, and now how do you embrace that and take that? And that's an example of the game the game we just ran, by the way. Or one of the players did, and they did it brilliantly. Everybody started laughing. It was like this comedic. We had this comedic relief for like several sessions of the professor and his students, which were the adventuring party, and it was absolutely brilliant. And those kind of things come because you embrace flaws, you embrace failure, and then you have a great story to tell about it.
I got to start a whole new character section for my character but with this idea of planning for these failures. I love that idea. I love the like what are these scenarios where like I will fail or like things that will go wrong. Like I think that's a brilliant idea. It's really good.
Well, I will say that's really hard to understand how to create a character and want to put flaws into it for me because since I do mostly board games, you're trying to optimize what you have, what you're playing every turn, and so that you're kind of impenetrable. And with the RPGs, it sounds like you don't necessarily, you want to optimize certain aspects, but you also really want to play up these parts that you are weaker or where you need the support of other characters, and so that you do something stupid, like falling off the log into the lake because your acrobatics is so low or whatever. So I may have to trash my characters and restart again.
Well, here's the thing.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
I know. It'll totally be fine.
You want to optimize in some cases mechanically for your character so they feel powerful and stuff. That's part of the fun. But you also want to optimize fun in the game. Like that should be optimized. You should optimize the fun of other players, right? Like building those things like flaws in helps optimize for everybody's enjoyment. There's other things to optimize, that those things are good at, that just building the strongest character you can doesn't do a good job of.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to think. Let's go back to stealing things from your favorite media. And Ben, you brought up the point of like, everyone remembers their failure. They have some of the most fun. Man, I'm going to go to Star Wars, right? Because Ben Conzi, I remember you really cut your teeth on the Star Wars RPG in a lot of ways. You did so much organized play with that back in the day. But what is almost universally people like The Empire Strikes Back most? Everybody fails in Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
Right? Empire Strikes Back is a story of the people failing. Luke loses his hand. Lando loses his entire city. Han Solo gets captured right after he breaks Leia's heart. 3PO gets shot into pieces. R2-D2 decides to stick his hacking tool into a power port and gets overloaded. I mean, everybody fails in that movie, and it's considered one of the best pieces of Star Wars out there. And there are times when everybody gets a chance to shine in it, though, right? Everyone gets to show off how cool they are in some places, and then they fail. And that makes that triumph of Return of the Jedi that much better.
Exactly, and it's, you know, Batman Begins. Why do we fall, Bruce? So that we can pick ourselves back up, right? It's actually on the back of the T-shirt I'm wearing, and it's so embracing failure is an awesome thing when you're exploring an RPG, because it, like I said, it generates really amazing stories. Now, I know we've been really D&D specific, and that's because I think most of the players we're talking with, half the people that are on this show are very Dungeons and Dragons specific as far as players and background. But James, you and I have generated characters for other systems and other games, and I'm just kind of curious if, if you're rolling up an investigator, or you're looking at a cyberpunk game, or you're looking at maybe a gothic horror game, or some of these other systems, Star Wars, whatever. Star Wars is probably a little bit just fantasy and space, so there's a lot of similarities. But these other genres of games where there's maybe the goals or the objectives or what you're playing in the system isn't necessarily a heroic character. How is that approach different for you, and what do you think about?
Oh man, I mean, I think that's another reason that makes the session 0 so important. Because I love 5th edition D&D, especially. I've been playing since the THACO days, but I think one of the important things about bringing people into a new setting and system is explaining the differences and explaining what you're looking for in those difference in the different setting. To be able to say to people, hey, this is an RPG. Let me take Free League's Alien RPG, very, very great game. But you have to tell everyone, hey, sit down. We are playing a game that is ultimately about horror and suspense. So now you're only going to make a skill check when failure would have some kind of consequence. The mechanics inform this. If you fail, you gain stress. And eventually the stress is going to make your character do something. It's going to break your character, be it they get frustrated and just stomp out of the room, or they snap and yell at somebody, or in extreme cases, they freak out and scream and run away. You don't want to drop someone who's only ever played D&D and goes, oh, I failed a will save. I guess I'm going to be immobile for one turn, and drop them into a game where, oh, guess what? The xenomorph can kill you in one turn. So I think a big part of that, for me, when I'm making a character in a brand new system, is don't just read the character creation rules, even though, my God, those are some of the most fun part of anything. But also immerse yourself in the minutia of what that system and setting is all about. And this is, I think, another reason why picking your inspiration needs to be appropriate. If we sit down to play, again, I'll stick with Alien. Why not? I brought it up. If we sit down to play a game of Aliens, well, I don't want my inspiration necessarily to be Elgin from Honor Among Thieves, right? Maybe I do. Maybe. But I want to think about, okay, this is not a game of heroes and villains. This is going to be a game of space marines or truckers in space or colonists trying to survive in a hostile environment. What media have I seen that informs that specific style of play, and adjust my settings from there, adjust my expectations from there. And I think, Cozy, you brought up like, if you're not playing, you're playing criminals or something. Okay, now we've got to have a nice session zero where we can think about, is this going to be a game where we want to end it Reservoir Dogs style? Spoiler alert for Tarantino's first movie, I guess. Or is this going to be a game where we want to do the Merry Band of Thieves? We've got to set those expectations first and foremost. But another thing is, going back to what I said about looking forward to failure. And we are living in an era of RPGs where so many mechanics reward a particular way of thinking about your character. So many mechanics will reward, if you're willing to let your character fail at this, you get a cookie for later. And that's something I always consider as well.
Yeah, no, it's I remember the old days of RPGing and D&D where, oh, wait a minute, you have a negative in a score? How are you playing that character? And one of the people that I was loosely playing with and or knew, he would say, like, that's the most fun character I have to play, because it gives me extra challenges trying to overcome their disadvantage in the game, as well as an opportunity to take advantage of that from a storytelling basis, from how I deal with encounters. So yeah, embracing those negative, like those types of things, and I don't want to think of them as negative things. They're just opportunities for additions to the story, which again, those to me are really good opportunities for a good role playing story. So with that, I think we've kind of talked about a lot of these character creation concepts and ideas and what gets us excited about it. And none of it was mechanical, right? None of these things are replacing the whole chucking 46 and dropping one, or doing a points buy, or how to optimize your character. They're all just concepts, system agnostic really, but concepts that when we sit down on the table and we're getting ready to play the character that we have in our head, how do we communicate that to others at the table, what it is and what we're embodying and how that might relate? Because we didn't talk a lot about, we talked a little bit about, that group dynamic and whatnot, but it's also interesting as those things and those traits come out, how I would imagine characters start to, oh, hey, this might be a really good friend or a character that I might be able to buddy up with in game a little more, because our character concepts and what we're thinking are very similar in orientation or behavior, and how that then becomes a piece or a part of that character as it goes into the game, and or maybe potential, in the backstory or backdrop, there's some thing that might bring some kind of conflict then, or maybe leverage or potentially leverage for the GM to be able to bring into conflict within the game. And those are all important aspects. I know, Justin, you talked a little bit about the character background of Koth, and how Koth in his gladiatorial background was, controlled or was basically owned by these wizards, right? And then of course, as we were doing and coming up with that backstory, I knew in the game we were going to have an encounter with those wizards, and potentially multiple encounters depending on the choices of the players, of course. But I knew I was going to be able to introduce that conflict, and by having that aspect of the backstory, not only did you have a conflict in game that you really enjoyed, but it was an opportunity to, for Koth to come out, to showcase to the rest of the group, to have a moment in the sunshine, while also having this really kind of negative thing that was there, and in every story, whether it's Empire Strikes Back or it's Lord of the Rings or it's whatever your favorite RoboCop or whatever your favorite addiction is to in movies or stories or books, there's always that conflict, that journey that somebody's kind of dig deep and try to get past, and how they overcome that, and being able to pull that out in an RPG table, that's so good. So, all right, I think with that, we probably should go ahead and get this thing wrapped up. I think we've really done a great job talking about characters and concepts, and if you have any of your own favorite concepts or thoughts that you use for character generation, go ahead and leave those notes, drop us a line on any of our social media, whether that's Facebook, X, or Twitter, formerly Twitter, or Instagram, or of course, if you're listening to this show over on YouTube, you can just drop a comment right on the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, folks, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at wiscodice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Ah, darn, I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
Wiscodice.com.
That's right, it's wiscodice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out.